We're talking the language of education. Is the mother tongue still relevant? Big conversation. I've got two guests in studio now, Dr. Clement Apah and Dr. Reginald Dua, both with the Linguistics Department of the University of Ghana. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
So what does this mean? I mean, the language of education, is the mother tongue still relevant? Realistically, we can't use the mother tongue to do the whole of our education, can we?
Well, we never said we wanted to. The nation never said we wanted to do everything in the mother tongue. So it is just a part of it that the educational policy says we should do. In the first few years of the child's education, they say should be in the mother tongue, defined variously to include the person's first language. So they say while the person is at the beginning, incipient stages of studies where they're just building concepts, trying to appreciate what it is that they're doing, do it in a language the child already knows.
Okay.
So the child doesn't have to both understand the language and the concept at the same time. But the child can understand the concept in a language the child knows already. Basically, that is what this whole thing is about.
So the rule is a language that the child knows already.
Yes.
If the child knows English, then it's just right that they continue with English.
Well, yes, the child can know English or is able to speak English, but the point is that does the whole community also speak English? Because this child needs to use this language in a particular community, in a particular concept. So if the child can speak English, well, the question is, does the whole community also speak English? If not, then the child should be able to, in order for the child to become productive, that child should be able to use the language of the community. And that's what Dr. Apah was talking about.
Isn't it a bit confusing if a child is familiar with a particular language and then you're asking that for the sake of the entire community, use another language that everybody else around you understands?
I think this is a very important question in that we're saying teach the child in a language the child understands, which for some people in Ghana now is English, especially in Accra. So yes, if you went to a school like Morning Star, I mean, it's English. Virtually everybody speaks English. But if you moved just outside of Accra and then went, not even outside too much, as I say, outside of Accra, but just Anumle, just around the Legon area. And then you get to know that, yes, this is Accra, but a lot of the children really don't speak English. So it is true that if you want to teach the child in a language the child understands, that for some people, they must be taught in English because of where they live, because that's the only language they speak. But the problem we have as a nation is that, indeed, we don't speak as much English as we think we do. We don't. So there are areas where children are taught in English and they don't really understand that. And if you ask people who've gone to do national service in the villages and people who've gone for what in the universities they call student in church evangelism, they go and they volunteer to teach in the school. They teach and they ask the children, do you understand? Everybody goes, yes, madam.
But they really don't understand.
You know, so we have a problem. And there have been a lot of talk about this thing since the minister's comment on this one, which I suppose we'll come to talk about. The situation is not as straightforward as it looks. We can't say that teach everybody in a local language. What local language if you're in Accra, she said. What local language if you are in Sekondi? Probably Fanti, but it's not as simple as that.
But now that you mentioned the minister's comment, maybe I should ask Dr. Dua, what's your understanding of that? Because I had a lot of objections. People saying, for instance, the atom. I mean, how would you mention that if you were to find a tree word for it? There are so many things that we can't obviously learn using tree or other organ.
Because we haven't done our homework. We're not prepared to use these languages for instruction. If your policy states that you have to use the mother tongue for education, then you work on these individual mother tongues so that you get the appropriate terms, or you can even coin terms to reflect these concepts. But because we've reneged ourselves to the concept that only English should be used, we're not prepared to work on our local languages. And therefore, these terms will continue to elude everybody. So it is actually wrong for people to assume that our local languages will not be able to capture all concepts, because languages in themselves can be productive, very, very productive, depending on how much time you spend to expand it. But we haven't done that because that hasn't been our focus. Once we're determined to use our local languages as the mode of teaching, then we will spend time to work on it, so that the terms that we think we don't have, will actually produce them.
So this is the sense I get. We're not ready yet, are we?
Mamavi, you know, it is easy to say that we don't have the terminologies, but is it true? Is it true? Those who are saying that, what research have they done to come to that conclusion? For example, is it true that we can't talk about astrology? What is it about? Astronomy, what is it about? Don't you have the word for star? Haven't our people been talking about stars all their lives? The fishermen use the stars as the cardinal point from which to, or the source of direction when they're lost at sea.
Yeah.
Are you sure that we can't talk about astrology and astronomy?
But do we even have a problem?
As in?
Because, you know, when we started this conversation, you did say that for places where obviously the children can't speak English, it's appropriate to use the local language, which has already been done. I'm not sure we have a problem all the way to the universities or the tertiary institutions. Do we?
We do.
We do.
We
Really?
do. Here's the problem. We have made a blanket policy on language of instruction, and this policy has nothing to do with the children who are being taught and also where the children are being taught. I grew up in Kumasi, and when I went to school, I don't remember actually using English so much at school. And in Kumasi, we don't use English.
So it doesn't mean the teacher didn't speak English too.
The teacher spoke English, but nobody cared. Because at the end of the day, whenever we're out of the classroom, we don't speak English. You see, speak English on campus signs all around, but nobody cares.
But the exam questions were set in English.
Here's what we don't understand. We think that so long as you don't use English, a lot of people imagine that you can't speak it or you don't understand it, but that's so wrong. There are many children who are very competent in English and also competent in their mother tongue as well. Of course, you can't use these two languages at the same time. So the choices that you make would reflect what is acceptable in the community. So my problem, and maybe this also reflects the general linguistic feeling, is that we have made a policy that doesn't take into consideration real facts on the ground. One, the location or the community that we are citing this school, and also the people involved, the dominant languages involved. One of the problems that has been raised is that, well, there are so many other languages in Ghana. So which ones do we use? And this is one of the things, one of the questions which we will discuss at this colloquium, that, well, does the fact that there are multiple languages in itself count as a formidable challenge?
What do you think?
I don't.
Because if you say Twi is largely spoken, I haven't done any research, but I want to believe so. If you were to go to Anglonga, my hometown, and you spoke Twi, more than half of the people would not understand you.
Okay, that's fair. So don't teach them Twi there. This is what we are saying. Teach them what they would understand. That's one way to go. all right? Since we do not have a national language. A national language is a local language which has been elevated to, say, official status, right? Which can be used in official settings. We don't have that. But if we don't have a national language and we have all these indigenous languages spoken in different geographic areas, then why don't we concentrate as and when these languages are spoken at these particular geographic areas?
It's interesting you're given a platform for people to talk about some of these issues. A lot of people think that we're not ready, but what should we expect from this forum that you have?
We have experts, people who've taken time to think deeply about these issues, coming to address all the possible questions that may be raised. So if you look at the panelists that we have there, pretty international, but also local, so more local, as it were. So we have Professor Topio Omoniyi, a professor of social linguistics from Roehampton, the UK. Mrs. Felicia Yadumbuache from the Ministry of Education. Ms. Marian Che, a legal practitioner and a parent, so we want to know the view of the parents. Professor Felix Ameka, a Ghanaian but teaching in Leiden in the UK. Professor Sechi Beidu, immediate past Dean, Faculty of Languages, University of Education, Winneba. Mr. Charles Ahetochega, Director of National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. And then a teacher, Mr. Mohammed Wells Nuhu, a supervisor at Anomle Basic Schools. Now, what they will be doing will be to find out what everybody thinks. But then these professors also have taken time to study. Indeed, I think listening to all that has been said since the minister's comment, the most interesting one has come from one of the Imani guys' name.
Franklin? No.
Not Franklin.
Okay.
M Pedigree.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think that he presented the most thought-provoking
What
issue.
did he say?
He says that basically we should be talking about dominant languages, which is our position. We shouldn't be talking about just any language at all being used as a medium of instruction. If you come to Accra, what is a dominant language? Even within Accra, if we segmented Accra into various parts, what would be the dominant languages in those locales? Now, if we got to know what those dominant languages were, then we will be able to select languages that the people can be instructed in. Now, there was another newspaper article in the Daily Graphic which sort of problematized everything about language. Everything. It says there are so many languages, which of them should we choose? And if you went to the Volta region, there are the Anglos, there are those from the Vadome and all those. But you would understand that everybody who is in the Volta region would understand a version of Ewe. And there's a version of Ewe that is common to all of them. I'm a Fanti, he is Asante. But if I'm instructed in Asante, I can understand it. Of course, there will be certain lexical items that will vary. But even those ones, if he says Kramai and I'm a Fanti, I say Bodom, I mean, that is just something little that can be dealt with. So what we should be concentrating on is looking at the dominant languages spotted over the country and to see how these can be exploited in such a way that our children can be taught in a way they can understand when they need to understand the concept.
Sure.
Later on, they can build on that.
All right. So when is this colloquium taking place?
It's on the 28th, which is Wednesday. The conference starts. This colloquium is part of the conference, School of Languages Conference, which you're organizing together with the Language Center, the School of Languages, Language Center, and the Central University College. And this colloquium is on the second day of the conference. That is Wednesday, 28th October 2015 at the ISE Conference Facility at 5 p.m. And it will be chaired by Professor Kwesi Yanka of the Central University College, the president, and moderated by Professor Nana Bamfo, the Dean of the School of Languages. So we want to invite everybody to come at 5 p.m. Whatever you think about mother tongue education, whatever you think about language of instruction, just come tell us, because it's open forum. The professors will talk but it is more we listening to what the people think and then presenting the academic point of view as well.
Is the Ministry of Education considering what you're discussing? Is it
Yes.
going to impact on ultimately the decision that they will take?
Policy makers need concrete research to be able to make good policies. So one way to do this is to openly discuss this issue. I mean, there's a burning question about mother tongue education. Is it still relevant within our current day realities of globalization? So once we get together, both professionals, scholars, and also those who actually work in schools, once we get together and talk about the challenges and also the obvious benefits, then that's really something good. That's
Okay.
something that will be useful to the ministry.
All right, we'll be following through with this conversation, but I thank you for your time today. Dr.
you.
Clement Apa and Dr. Reginald Dua with the Linguistics Department of the University of Ghana. Thanks a lot on this conversation. Stay with us here on the AM show. Still a lot more to come.